Hey, what's up, metal and heavy music fans? It's Flight of Icarus again with MetalTrenches.com, and it's time for another tier list. Today it's going to be German industrial metal band Rammstein.
Du hast mich.
Very excited to do this one as it's another band that I've listened to for a long time and have a lot of fond memories going all the way back to childhood, really. But before I do that, if you'd like to stay up to date with the best and brightest metal bands and albums from the underground and above, then stick with me by hitting that subscribe button down below. I upload new content every single week. But let's just jump right into it. We're going to start in 1995 with Herzeleid, and I'm glad to finally be talking about a band whose language I'm actually fairly familiar with. I took German in college, so most of these pronunciations should be pretty good. This is an album that I kind of had to cycle back to because I feel like a lot of other people, I got into Rammstein with Sehnsucht, and it was a little while before I kind of came back around and really gave this one a chance, because being a kid at the time that the other one came out, I was just sort of like, oh, that album's older, so it's probably not as good and whatever. But I was really missing out because this is a fantastic album. I think what really kind of sold me finally on really checking it out was watching Lost Highway, the David Lynch film. He prominently features some Rammstein in that movie.
Did you want to ask me why?
And it really fit the scene so well. And I was like, damn, this is a really good song. Maybe I've been sleeping on this. And I finally went back and just realized how many amazing tracks there are on here. Wollt ihr das Bett in Flammen sehen? Fantastic song, very heavy. This is just a very minimalistic, much more serious album too. I feel like their humor hadn't kind of fully formed at this point, but super, super heavy album. Potentially their heaviest, I would guess. Weißes Fleisch is good. Der Meister. Asche zu Asche, fantastic song. That's one of the more catchy ones. Zeman, so getting into the more slower tracks. They're kind of ballads, more or less, if you want to call it like that. Really, every song on here, the title track too. And by the way, Herzeleid means heartache in German, or at least roughly. So ultimately, I'm going to put this one at A tier. Very solid start for the band. I quite enjoy it. It's one of the main ones that I still regularly listen to at this point. But now let's go to 1997 with Sehnsucht, and this translates to desire, more or less. Love the album art on this one. It's got all the different pictures of the band members too, with this kind of faded white paint on their faces and various kind of contraptions on them, kind of going into the sadomasochistic vibes that the band definitely became known for, especially going all the way to their live shows. And that was another appeal to me being young too. I remember I got like 2 metal and guitar magazines that would come to my house each month, and they would have pictures of the band spitting fire and wearing these crazy contraptions and hearing about them doing odd sexual stuff on stage. And you better believe I was intrigued. Of course, though, I heard the song Du hast on the radio, and I can't exactly remember the timing because there was that, obviously, which was definitely a phenomenon, but also I have the Mortal Kombat Annihilation soundtrack, probably one of the first CDs I ever owned, and the song Engel is on there. And so I can't remember which came first, but somewhere between those two songs, I was like, okay, I got to get into these guys. And so went out, got the album by one means or another, and this is a classic for a reason. Another album that front to back, there's not a bad song on here, but particularly I love Engel to this day. I think it's one of their best songs. I love that little whistling intro. And little fun fact too, for those of you who watched Twin Peaks, in the newest season, kind of an Easter egg, sort of, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier about how he used Rammstein's music in Lost Highway. David Lynch's character in Twin Peaks is sitting at his desk, and he's whistling Engel. And at first, I was kind of like, no, he's not whistling that. It's got to be something else. And then I remembered Lost Highway. I was like, oh, he's familiar with the band, so he probably is. So I found that amusing when I watched that for the first time. But other great deeper cuts on here, like Buch dich, Bestrafe mich, Spiel mit mir is kind of a fun, more upbeat one. Klavier, one of my favorite of their slower, kind of sad songs, and just very dramatic. I love to sing along it with the Dort am Klavier, and it's kind of a messed up song too, because he more or less, if I recall, because again, I was taking German, so I was like reading the lyrics and interpreting it as I was learning it and learning how messed up some of them are. And as I recall, he's like in love with this woman who plays the piano, but then he like murders her or something like that. Alterman, also another great track. Yeah, amazing album. Getting a little bit campier at this point, but still maintaining some of the more serious vibes too, kind of having a good balance. This is an S tier album for sure for the band, I think, obviously. All right, then in 2001, we got Mutter, which means mother, and another fantastic album. And honestly, for me, I feel like most people kind of put Sehnsucht or sometimes the Herzeleid as their favorite album from the band. For me, it's all about Mutter. I think this is the pinnacle of everything that they've done, and I would put it first every time. The track listing is absolutely incredible. Mein Herz brennt is just such an epic opener. You've got that super slow, dramatic, symphonic with the strings building, and then finally he busts out with the Mein Herz brennt, and you get that fantastic synth line with the da-na-na, da-na-na-na, da-na-na. So, and then you bust into that kind of clanky bass riff, and it's just such a well-composed song. And most of the songs on here are like that. They're just super, like, kind of the most dramatic and symphonic and just big productions that they've done are all on this album. Zona fits in there too. Great music video for that one too. If I recall, it's got kind of a Snow White visual to it, unless I'm confusing that with another one. Feuer frei, we used to play that at the pool hall we would go to all the time because it was like the only Rammstein track in the jukebox, and people get so annoyed, but just really fun, kind of more straightforward, aggressive song. The title track, Mutter, Spieluhr, has the toy music box, which is what a Spieluhr is. Rein Raus Adios is a fun one too, kind of a deeper cut there. But yeah, so much fun to like just sing along with, and I still like quote these songs regularly. I sing them out loud, like I'll be in the shower and they'll just come to me. They're super just infectious and catchy, but also very grand in scope, and there's sort of a sense of humor to some of it, but also just this profoundness to some of the themes on display. And so for all those reasons, obviously this one also has to be S tier, but I would, if I'm like kind of putting them in order, it has to go right at the top for me. All right, then we're at 2004 with Reise Reise, which means just that, Reise Reise, kind of just a call out to everyone. Solid album. The opening track, very good. Mein Teil was the lead single, as I recall, for this. I remember when they were hyping up the album. This is the album that came out after I'd gone off to college, and they started playing the Mein Teil music video. And if you're not aware, that song is about that true story where I think they were Germans. These two Germans met up with the consensual idea that one of them was going to eat the other. In fact, this is too spicy for YouTube, but they fried up certain parts of him while he was still alive and ate them together. And then he eventually killed him and cannibalized him completely and then was arrested. But ultimately, I believe he's released now and just on the streets. And I don't know how I feel about that. I'm like, kind of like, I guess it was consensual, but it's still straight up murder. So I don't know. So there's that. And then it has this crazy music video, obviously, to sort of go along with it. Because Mein Teil literally means like my part. and you can sort of get where they're alluding to here. I feel like this is where their sense of humor really starts to take a front seat in the discography. And the video's weird too. Like there's a dude like on a leash, or are they all on leashes? I remember there's this woman like leading them around through the city like on leashes, and they're crawling around. Again with the kind of slave master motif, this sadomasochism and all that. Yeah, interesting stuff. Kinda Lust, fun, kind of bouncy song. Ich hab keine Lust. Ich hab keine Lust. Very, very fun. America is just a classic. This very satirical kind of, it's like they wrote a pop song that to the uninitiated would sound like it's very sort of nationalist and pro-America, but there's a lot of satire behind it. And they even at some point say this is not a love song in English. And it's kind of fun too that they're alternating back and forth between English and German on this song. Moscow is a deeper cut that I really enjoy on here. I really like the female vocals on that one, the kind of higher pitched ones. They sort of remind me a little bit of what's that group called? Die Antwort, the chick in that, because they've got this really high pitched, almost like chipmunk voice girl going like "Was Madrid" or something like that. She's singing in Russian, I believe. Morgenstern's pretty good. Stein Stein is another great slower kind of ballad, and it's a messed up song too because it's Stein Stein's basically brick by brick, and the whole song's about how he's slowly bricking this person into like an enclosure. He's like trapping him inside and just away from the world. So it has kind of almost like a death metal vocal vibe where it's like odd, strange ways to die sort of theme. But it's written very well, and again in this kind of profound way. Ona Dick, also good. Amor is a nice closer. I would give this album an A. It's pretty solid. It's about as good as Herzeleid, and those are definitely my top 4. I feel like you cannot touch this band's first 4 albums in terms of just consistency, and they're just a really good time, both matching kind of fun. The songwriting's great, the heaviness is balanced with the sense of humor, and lots of great stuff going on. Unfortunately, that's kind of where they lost the plot for me, because that's when they dropped in 2005 Rosenrot, which I no longer have physical copies to show you at this point, because not to spoil too much, but I'm not a huge fan of the rest of these albums. There are some decent moments on Rosenrot. When it first came out, I was pretty excited about it, because again, I'm coming off the high of these 4 albums with a band that to me is pretty much untouchable and has not released a bad one yet. So I'm pretty sure I even bought this one and had it delivered, and for a long time really tried to convince myself that I really enjoyed this album, but the fact is it's just not that good. It's kind of bland. None of the songs hit particularly strong. Mann gegen Mann is decent, and the title track is probably the only one that kind of lingers in my head. As far as seeing that title, I can kind of hear it play out in my head, but everything else is sort of like, I don't even really remember what that listened to until I go back and play it again. So for me, this is just like an okay album. It's sort of a mixed bag. I was originally going to put it at B, but honestly, I might even put it at C. Not quite sure about that, but we'll leave it at that for now. Then in 2009, we've got Liebe ist für alle da, which is like love is for everyone. This is a weird album. This is a very weird album that I don't particularly like. I remember when the lead for this, which I believe was Pussy, they dropped a music video for that song. I was going to say it's basically porn, but no, it's just porn. Like, it's straight up porn. It's all body doubles. But this is like deep fakes before deep fakes, more or less, where they made it look like it's just the band members having an orgy. That's the music video. And they've got these really campy vocals. The chorus is literally, "You have a pussy. I have a dick." I remember watching it and being like, I was laughing and I was like, oh, Rammstein, you, you mad lads. Like, I had come to sort of expect that, so I guess ultimately it intrigued me enough to check it out. But I feel like that's kind of all this album has. Is it's like shock value was always part of their repertoire and kind of part of their aesthetic, but I feel like here is where they just jump the shark, and that's like almost all it is at this point. Like the songwriting just isn't there. I can't really get down with it. And for those reasons, I kind of have to put it at a D. It's just not particularly good. It's not memorable. It's not an album I want to go back to. And as amusing as that music video and that song are, it's kind of just that. It's almost, it's like they've moved from like having humor in the songs to they're just a joke band. And that's not a good thing, in my opinion. And then finally, it took a decade almost, but in 2019, just last year, we got this Untitled album with just the matchstick on the cover. And I have to say, when they first started dropping singles for this one, I started getting excited. I had not really given a shit about Rammstein in a long time, like well over a decade at that point. I had my old albums, I would go to them, I enjoyed that still. But as far as being like a Rammstein fanboy and wanting to go to a show and all that, that had long died off. And I just had kind of stopped caring. And finally, they played the single for Deutschland. And that is a fantastic song. I was like, whoa, look at this. They're like writing songs again. There's composition here. There's dynamics. And they had that super cinematic music video to go with it.
Mein Herz in Flammen.
And then they followed that up with Radio, which I didn't like quite as much, but goddamn if that song did not get lodged in my head, and I was singing the chorus on repeat. And again, amazing cinematic video. They did great marketing for this album with some really amazing production values. And that definitely helped a lot, because a good music video can be the difference between selling your albums and not, for sure. Auslander is also a good track, and ultimately, when I finally listened to the whole thing, the disappointment, though, was that all of those tracks are in the first half, and the first half is fantastic. If this had just been an EP with those songs, this could have been like an S tier for me. Like, that would be on par with Mutter and Sehnsucht. But ultimately, right around Sex, it starts to fall apart. And I like that I don't know, I have mixed feelings about it, I guess. This is definitely a much more serious album. They dropped a lot of the more overt, ridiculous humor. It's still there in a sense, but these are much more slower, kind of ballad-like songs, but not as interesting ones, like with Stein Stein and Klavier. This is just very sort of stripped back, simplistic, which could be interesting. And in some cases, I was kind of intrigued by that. Even the production is definitely tamped down. This is not the big orchestral, powerful sound of Mutter. This is something that they had not quite done before. And so that was kind of cool. But it didn't really make for interesting songs. I was pretty bored and found it to be kind of bland. So for ultimately, it's sort of a mixed bag for me. And for that, I kind of wanted to put it at a C. I wish I could put it at a B, but again, it's just the first half is just S tier quality music, and then the second half is kind of C and D tier quality music. So it really drags it down in terms of as an album, how I feel about it. And ultimately, I think C still feels about right. And I believe when I rated the album and did my review on Metal Trenches, that's the range that it fell into, somewhere along like a 7 or 7.3. Somewhere in there. But yeah, that's my discography for Rammstein. And as always, I'm most interested to hear in the comments what you think. What are your favorite Rammstein albums? What are your least favorite albums? But that'll do it for this video. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.